Now, here are Morgan Streetman and Roxanne Wilder.
We have some exciting guests calling in today, Morgan, because of the elections coming up, so we've got a full lineup.
Oh, we got a great day planned for y'all today. You're going to love this. We're going to be breaking some news, too, today, at least in the Gringo Radio Network we are. This only made it out on Telemundo last week, and I asked Pat George earlier if he'd even heard about it, and it didn't make it. That's what I'm saying. It didn't make it through to the English language news that I have seen, really. In a big way. So we got something really exciting. A good friend of ours here on the show, some news out of something that he did last week, and you're going to really want to hear about that. We're going to take him on, I think, in the second segment, and he's going to tell us all about that. I don't want to steal his thunder, so I'm dying to tell you about it. It is really, really cool, but I don't want to steal his thunder. And, you know, something we talk about here a lot, Roxanne, because we do have the Tampa city elections coming up, and, of course, we've got things on the ballot. We've got somebody coming in today who's running for a spot on city council, a great guy, and he's going to fill us in on some of those ballot measures. I know a lot of people have been asking me, how do you vote on those ballot measures? And you remember my favorite refrain, and that's when in doubt, vote no.
Right.
You know, if you're not sure, if you don't know about it, just vote no.
We don't need to change it.
We don't need to change the charter. We don't need to change the state constitution. Just vote no. Vote no when in doubt. So that's a safe rule of thumb on these things. And but anyway, our special guest will fill us in on some more of those details. And you know, I do want to give a little shout out to our friend Jeff Deist and his show on Thursday morning, Good Money with Jeff Deist, which runs from 9 to 10 on Thursday morning here on Money Talk 1010. And he does a lot of stories and commentary on the economy. And I'll tell you what, that is something that a lot of people are thinking about right now. And I think normally they don't think about it when it's going well. The economy's going good. Nobody really thinks about it. Everything's going good. But right now, our economy is suffering because of some terrible monetary policies that we've had in place in this country for years. I mean, this goes back to George W. Bush's administration, you know, all the way back. So we're going back 20, 25 years that we've had these terrible policies. Alan Greenspan was the head of the Fed. And a lot of people probably don't remember the tech boom and the tech crisis. Those of us that are a little more experienced remember it. And that was an easy money crisis where a bunch of money was being loaned out at very low interest rates and thus was allowed to flow into the market. And people were paying excessive values for tech stocks. You know, it's similar to these kind of bubbles that have happened throughout history. I mean, we can think back. There was a bubble in tulips in Holland. I think it was in the 1600s, you know, where like a single tulip would be like a family fortune. People would pay something crazy for it. It was just insane. And then all of a sudden the market popped and went away like in a couple of days. Well, we see these bubbles pop. We saw the tech bubble pop. We saw the housing bubble get inflated through easy money all through the late 90s and 2000s. All that easy money flowing into the housing market, prices going up. And then in 2008 through about 2013, we saw prices collapse because there was bubble popped and there was a crisis. But you have to remember that when Barack Obama came into office starting in 2009, January 20th, 2009, I think their first move on the interest rates was to drop them totally to zero. If you remember that, the Fed did, and then they kept them at zero for his entire term. And so that means there was essentially no cost to borrowing money. So people were borrowing money and putting it into real estate. They were borrowing money and putting it into the stock market and other things. And you saw these things inflate over all these years. And then, of course, we hit the COVID time period, the COVID crisis, they call it. And we just blew the money out even further. And we've talked about that on this show, how, you know, in a couple of short years, I mean, we blew out almost the same amount of money that we had created in the entire history of the Republic. I mean, it's mind-boggling how much money they created in such a short amount of time and pushed it out into the economy. Of course, a lot of it went to fraud. A lot of us saw that. You know, we could see news articles about people who, you know, made up fake companies and fake documents and got their PPP loans and their EIDL loans, and it was all fake. And they're catching some of them, but be assured if they're catching some of them, they're not catching all of them. They never catch all of them. You never get 100% of anything. So they're catching some of them, but there was a lot more fraud out there. And now that the easy money has been Well, what were you going to say?
I was just going to say it's crazy that people were ready to jump on this and do this fraud. Like the
Yeah.
vast number of people who participated in it, you're like, how are they waiting and ready to take advantage of this? But people have criminal minds, I guess, and opportunities struck for them.
Well, that takes my mind in a little bit of a different direction, but it was a topic generally that I wanted to talk about today if we had time, and that is sort of the growth of people being comfortable with fraud, with grift, with not being real. And I sent you a story, I don't know if you had a chance to read it, about cheating on college campuses and how rampant cheating has become, and that professors are just completely demoralized by the rampant cheating. They can't figure out how to beat it. They try to design systems so that students can't cheat, and this is all discussed in detail in the article, the ways they tried to do it. But the students are demanding a few things like being able to take their tests from home because of COVID. And also they should have 24 hours to take the test. And, it should be open book. It should be 24 hours. And so the teachers say, wait, don't open book, and you can't be on any other apps. And anyway, the students find workarounds. They message with each other. The article goes through a whole bunch of different ways that every time the professors have even tried to crack down on it, the students have done a workaround. And they just say, look at the grade inflation. I mean, people did not suddenly become a lot smarter in that you look around and the grades are all a lot higher. And they're talking about essays being turned in that have been written by ChatGPT.
Of course.
We've talked some about that, the AI, essentially chatbot, generative pre-trained transformer, they call it, GPT.
Content generator.
Yeah, it basically tries to come up with the most logical, correct response to whatever your prompt is. And so if you prompt it to write you an essay about something, it'll write you an essay about it. And then I guess kids are turning this in. And then there's countermeasures. We've got people coming out with an app that you can use where it can analyze and tell you whether ChatGPT wrote the essay. So this is something professors are going to be using going forward as they deal with all this cheating. But it's just, what's the point, right? Why are you going to college? Well, I'm not going to learn, right? I don't care about learning. I want to go party, and I want to get this thing on the wall that says I came and learned. But you didn't come and learn. But I don't care. I just give me the piece of paper. Just give me the job. Do I have to perform? I don't care. Just give me the money. So where did we go in society where everybody became so comfortable with just being a complete fraud? Seriously, just being a complete... I don't get it. You can look, another story we're not going to be able to cover in detail, but you look at these Fox News depositions, and basically what you got is all the Fox anchors are complete frauds. When they're in deposition under oath and they have to say what they really think, they don't think what they say on TV. They don't respect their audience. That's clear. You can read the depositions and you'll be shocked at the things you hear from people like Tucker Carlson, especially Sean Hannity, for all those Hannity fans out there. So, what you see is they're playing a character, is they're performing. This is pro wrestling. They're performing for us. We're the audience, and they're pretending to be good guys and bad guys and to hate each other. But really, around at the bar, after the audience is not watching, after the audience has left, they're slapping each other on the back, buying each other drinks, and enjoying their lifestyle that is funded by the performance that they put on for us. It's just shocking when you think about it. So, but bigger picture, that's happening all around our society. And I think what people are seeing is they're seeing, hey, the only way to get ahead is to cheat. And I don't want to be left behind. I don't want to be a sucker. In fact, if you remember in the article, one of the young men who was being interviewed said, basically, I'm the sucker here because I'm not cheating. I'm following the rules. My GPA is like a 2.5 and everybody else's GPA is like a 3.3 or 3.5, but they're all cheating. But they don't care. So, where have we lost our moral center as a society? A commitment to honesty, a belief that honesty is better than dishonesty, that you don't want to be dishonest. People used to take pride in being honest.
The GPA comment reminds me of steroids in baseball, that era.
Yeah.
Right? Everybody's numbers were inflated.
Well, that's right.
That's what ChatGPT is doing to
Well, we go a lot of places with that. One of the statistics I did want to throw at you about this fraudulent economy that we seem to live in is that big bankruptcies in January, and that's bankruptcies with more than $50 million in liabilities, hit the highest level since 2010. That tells you something. 20 of those bankruptcies. So 20 companies owing more than $50 million filed for bankruptcy in January 2023. That's a little forward indicator that something is seriously wrong with this economy if you didn't already know it. We'll be right back.
Back on the Morgan Streetman Show. And Morgan, we were talking about the economy in the last segment. I just have to add one little old real life experience that I went through this weekend. Of course, did our grocery shopping, and we buy some coloring books for the kids as a last minute grab at the stand. And we're going through, and Doug goes, "Roxanne, my husband says, did you see how much those coloring books cost?" And $11 for a piece for a Peppa Pig coloring book.
That's almost as much as an appetizer now at the restaurant.
I had half a mind to say, no, we're not going to get those after we rang them through. But then my kids would have meltdown. It's crazy. You really do have to look at everything you're purchasing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Our caller is on the line. So, Roxanne, we want to bring him in. Rafael Pisano is here with us today, and he's got some news for us about something that he did. He and his father did. And if you remember, folks, he's been on the show. He's guest hosted for us, been on the show 4 or 5 times, told his story, told his father's story, really, really passionate about the Cuba issues, about anti-communist issues. And he's trying to work to expose the efforts of the Cuban government to infiltrate our own government here locally. And he was able to expose some of that, thank God, on Friday. And it made Telemundo. And it was a beautiful video. But, Rafael, tell us exactly what happened on Friday. Welcome to the show, by the way.
Good morning, guys, and good morning to the listeners. On Friday, I went out to eat Friday evening with my father. It was around 7 in the evening, and we walk in just after 7 to a restaurant located on West Kennedy. It's called Mission Place or something like that, a nice fine dining French restaurant. And when I walk in and I'm waiting for the host to come to me, I look to my side, see a lot of suits and ties, and lo and behold, I recognize some of the faces, but I saw Albert Fox, which I spoke about on the show and many other outlets before, who's been fined by the Office of Foreign Asset Control $100,000 for unethical practices doing business with this communist regime 90 miles away in Cuba, 90 miles away from Key West. And he was there, and I was wondering what was going on, and I looked to who was standing by his side, and it's the Cuban ambassador for the communist state, which was here. And I was surprised because I've never seen that or run into somebody like that before. Obviously, we advocate internationally against the communist regime, yet we have a communist ambassador fine dining right here in Tampa Bay.
Wow. And you know what was so amazing to me, Rafael, is how many of our local officials, I mean, you mentioned Al Fox, he's not an official, he's like a lobbyist almost, but how many of our local officials were there, elected officials here in the city? Give us some of the names of some of the folks that were there having dinner with the Cuban ambassador.
Catering to the Cuban communist ambassador was City Councilman Guido Maniscalco. It was a shock because he's also of Hispanic descent. To see him there, he came up to me as soon as he saw me and my father walk in. He turned pale white, walked towards me, bowed his head, and said, "Uh-oh." And I told him, I put my hand on his shoulder, and I said, "It's a shame that you're of Hispanic descent, and you know what Cubans and people victims of communism have gone through, and you're here with these kind of people." He immediately took off out the door and left. There was also clerk of the court, Cindy Stewart. I was surprised. That's an individual. I don't know her party affiliation, but she has taken big contribution and endorsements by the Republicans here locally. She's with the clerk of court for Hillsborough County. That was a big shocker. And last but not least was Karen Perez with the Hillsborough County School Board. She's a school board member, out of all people, was there with a communist ambassador. And our schools, with the threat they face right now in Florida, with all the programs and ideology programs they want to instill in public school system, which we are fighting against, yet it's just crazy that we have a school board member there with a communist ambassador.
Yeah, didn't she run as a conservative school board member? I thought she was running sort of as one of those conservatives, we're not going to, have our schools grooming your children type of people. And what are these people? And Guido Maniscalco, he represents West Tampa, but I thought he was a conservative. But what are these people doing there with the Cuban consul?
This is what I've spoken about many times, and we lightly covered it before on 1010 a.m., which is they're here to network. That ambassador is brought here by Albert Fox, again, fined $100,000 in the past for his unethical, illegal practices with the regime. because they're all laws against that. Yet, nonetheless, he's here networking because they invite these people and these type of low-level politicians to these little dignitary parties, and they wine and dine them. They toast and do all those things. Why? Because it gives them a little bit of a platform. Wow, I get to go meet an ambassador. What's going on? A dignitary. And they bring them there, sucker them in, and then they start to gain influence with them and those around them. They try to get circles here, social circles and things of that nature. That's what the communists do. And if you recall what I shared on the show before, the declassified FBI report, where Cuba has an intelligence department specifically targeting U.S. academia, or schools or universities, that's what they try to do. So now that I see a school board member, I didn't expect it because they're more targeting universities, but here we have a school board member, and that's where the network starts. Because any relation she has with other universities or colleges, aside from the public school system, they've got one more that they can gain some ground on, and that's what they do.
Rafael, this is so eye-opening, and Morgan was telling me about it before we started the show today. And can you describe kind of what happened? You did some great description of the conversations you had, but what happened when you went in and sort of the feel, the vibe, what was going on?
Well, once I identified her, I look at my father, and he takes a close look, and he's like, "What?" And he pointed his finger and says, "Aren't you the representative of the communist murderous regime?" And she didn't know where to look. She didn't say a word. He continued to tell him, "I was in prison 18 years as a political prisoner, and I live in this country. And now you're going to come here where I live, where I raised my family, after you stripped us of everything." And then you started to speak for all the families in Cuba that actually right now are still in that imprisoned island under communist rule. He gave him that message repeatedly, but then I figured since there were non-Spanish speakers, I would go ahead and take the opportunity and speak in English. And I let those people go there. Mayor Rick Kreisman, former Mayor Rick Kreisman of St. Pete was there, and he had a Cuban flag lapel on, and I found that odd since the island's still under communism, and he's there with the ambassador. I thought that was a shame, so I told him, "And you elected officials, you so-called Americans that are here, I served overseas for this country, for democracy. My father fought against communism, yet you're here dining with this ambassador. You should be ashamed of yourselves, and your elected officials, if anything, you should consider telling her right now to return the fugitive cop killers that murdered our U.S. law enforcement officers. You should be asking her for that if you're asking her for anything." And then I gave him the names: New Jersey State Trooper Forster Warner. I let them know his boy was a little taller, 3 years old when they murdered him on the side of a highway in New Jersey. Then I said New Mexico State Trooper Robert Rosenblum. He has a daughter that still advocates for him after so many years. Yet nonetheless, none of them cared to ask her. So I kept repeatedly telling them, "You should think about that when you eat your fine dinner this evening."
Well, you know what? That is amazing. I mean, what a fortuitous event for you and your dad to walk in there and see that in action, because otherwise nobody would even have ever known that happened. And how many other times has it happened that we don't know about, right? Because we know that the Cuban government, as you've told us, as you've given us the examples with Al Fox and Bill Carlson, right? He wasn't there, but he was probably there in spirit. He probably had something else that he was doing, or otherwise he would have been there, because he's been somebody who has embraced the regime, the communist regime down in Cuba as well.
Yes, Morgan. He's the one that's organized these trips in the past. Usually these meetings are secret. They keep them secret just because of this, because they might run into a family that's been victimized by them for so many years and were in prison like my father, because we have many political prisoners here still in Hillsborough County and Tampa. I imagine he didn't go because he's running for re-election, but he organizes this, and I have all this information, just like I provided every time I go on the show, through a company which he heads, which is called Tucker Hall. It's a public relations company, and that, if you look up Tucker Hall Cuba online, you'll see a flow of information about all the work they do with the communist regime, and they try to make these ventures to see if they can get him in here. And he's partly the one responsible, along with Al Fox, for trying to promote a Cuban communist consulate right here in Tampa, and they try to sway it to St. Pete just to create some kind of a rivalry to see if Tampa will jump on it, because what they want to do is get into Tampa, is what they want to do. But Tucker Hall is a public relations company that he uses for these purposes. So I imagine he didn't go because he has an election coming up, but he's the one who's organized these trips multiple occasions in the past.
Well, Rafael, thank you so much for coming on the show on short notice to update us on this. I mean, what a fantastic story. And if folks want to find out more about this, where can they find out the news as it's ongoing? Are you posting about this somewhere, or should they keep up with Telemundo? What's the best source for these kind of local stories?
My Facebook page has some of these things, but right now there's a Twitter feed going around. I'm trying to see how I can maybe post it somewhere, but it's circulating through a lot of different avenues. I'll see if I can share the video with you, and maybe you can share that link once I send it to you.
Yeah, send me the Twitter link, and we'll be happy to share it with our audience. So, and it's so important that folks have an opportunity to go out and vote Bill Carlson out of office. And I saw Guido Maniscalco is also on the ballot this time. So, I mean, you've got an opportunity to show how you feel about this. You show how you feel about the embrace of a communist regime that has oppressed its own people, destroyed its own island, a beautiful island with a lot of resources and a wonderful people. And this communist regime has just absolutely smothered it for years and years. And now we've got our own local officials glad-handing, and they want to bring those folks here. They want to reward them. They want to inculcate them into our society, and just like they never did anything wrong. I mean, you can't. I mean, this is unbelievable stuff. This is a terrorist regime against its own people. Raphael, you got the last word. We got about 30 seconds.
And I can add, I've gotten some letters of support from Vietnam veterans and veterans of different eras saying that they showed their solidarity with Brigade 2506 members that went to the Bay of Pigs invasion and later mounted back up once they got bordered back after being prisoners of war and went to Vietnam to fight for our U.S. democracy. So they've been sending letters of support to Guido Maniscalco.
We got to go.
I'll be happy to send it to you. Take care.
All right, Raphael, thank you so much.
Thank you. You are listening to the Morgan Streetman Show on Money Talk 1010 AM. Morgan, that was quite an interview we had with Raphael Paisano.
What?
And some revelations there. And he told us we can follow him on social media. Go to Twitter to find out more about what happened at Mise en Place.
He sent me some of the accounts that are posting the video. If you want to see the video of him and his father at Mise en Place confronting the Cuban consul, go to @MJorgec 1994 @MJorgec 1994, and you can find the video, folks, and check it out yourself. Now, we've got a very special guest coming on with us. We're really excited to have him because he is going to be your opportunity to get that Bill Carlson out of office, that Cuba-loving guy who, for some reason, is still on the city council. And we've got a very special guest, Blake Casper, with us. We're so excited to have him. Blake, welcome to the Morgan Streetman Show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Well, and anybody who doesn't know Blake, I mean, he's a businessman here in Tampa, highly successful businessman. He ran a number of McDonald's. He had I don't know how many. It was wasn't it almost 100 McDonald's, Blake? I mean, it was a lot.
That's right. We had 87.
87. That's a big operation, folks. And then he created the Oxford Exchange, which all of us who eat downtown in Tampa for lunch, we know that's one of the finest restaurants that you can go to, and just a beautiful setting. And he sort of curated every piece of creating that. And then he was the visionary who created the Stovall House, which is beautiful. I've been lucky enough to be invited there a couple of times, and it is just absolutely gorgeous. And the folks that are members of that say how wonderful it is and how much they enjoy that club. But now, Blake, you're running for city council. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that? Tell us why you're running and what some of the key issues that you're focused on are.
Sure. So the impetus of my run is really back in the summer of 2020 and what I saw this city council do, led by Bill, with regards to our men and women in uniform. And so I, if you remember back then, there was all the riots and the looting and everything that was going on. And our city council really did not have the back of our police. And that's something that I just found to be unacceptable. And so that's really what motivated me to run against Bill. Bill was not going to have an opponent, which is, also why I ended up running so violent so late was when I found out that there wasn't going to be an option for those of us living in District 4. I decided, you know what, I'll be that option.
Well, and I think you're a great option, Blake. I mean, it would be wonderful. How's it going? Are you getting a good response on the campaign trail? And tell me about the issues that you're talking about with voters and what they think is important for the future.
Yeah, it's been a great 6 weeks. It's a quick campaign, and the election is obviously tomorrow. So thank you again for letting me be on the show. But it's really listening to the District 4 voters. And I think it's important to mention that just because Bill plays a very citywide role and is very critical of the mayor about citywide issues. But what I'm hearing from the voters are very District 4 issues, and they're real issues as far as infrastructure, as far as roads, as far as how development is happening, with really no regard to the neighborhoods. And so I'm beyond law enforcement and beyond law and order, which is critical and something that we absolutely have to focus on. I'll be focused on how our development is getting done in South Tampa.
And what do you think in terms of what are some of the ways that you want to, address that development? I mean, basically South Tampa, has some issues with transportation. The roads are frankly too small sometimes to support the amount of people moving through them, but we can't widen them because we'd have to get into, we'd have to take away people's houses to do it. And you've got water issues. So talk to us about what you're thinking about how those issues may be addressed.
Yeah. So there has not been a comprehensive zoning review really in Tampa for the last 30 years. So each of these developments is being individually approved by the city council. I think that's not a great system. And it's quite frankly how a lot of these developments have got shoehorned into some of the places, to your point, that can't support them, that are taxing our roads, they're taxing our other areas of infrastructure. So I think starting with a comprehensive review of the entire peninsula would be the approach. I think, certainly south of Dandy, which has got a whole host of issues where it hasn't been invested in to the point. And I think again, my opponent really in the 4 years that he's been in office, there isn't anything to show for that time. I do believe that there are funds, and he rightly says there are not funds in the city budget, but there are funds that are countywide, state, and federal funds, specifically the infrastructure bill that just got passed in Congress last year, which appropriates almost $13 billion to the state of Florida. There are funds that we could be going after for South Tampa that really my opponent doesn't spend any time focused on. He's focused on charter amendments. He's focused on the water issue, which is a real issue, but certainly doesn't require the amount of time that he puts into that. And then he's focused on Cuba. Honestly, I mean, he's dying for a Cuban embassy here in Tampa, which you heard from Rafael. I mean, that's a complete affront to so many of the Cubans that live here today. So those are the kind of things he loves to talk about and work on. He's not working on the roads, the flooding, and the development that are going on in District 4.
Blake, anything during the campaign process that has surprised you, caught you off guard? And I'm thinking of the mindset of, a lot of good people like yourself want to run, and then it's like, oh, I didn't know I was going to have to deal with this.
Yeah. I mean, it's going to happen, and politics is politics. It's things are going to be said. They're not true. I really don't look at. I don't look at next door, which is, people say I should, but I don't. And I try to get my family not to look at next door. But I think if anything, and who knows how tomorrow's going to turn out, but I think if anything, I'm hoping that it gets more people from District 4 interested in City Hall and perhaps running. Probably better candidates than me. But we need that. We need good people getting involved. And look, you're not going to die. Things are going to be said. It's not the end of the world. And I think hopefully I can be a good example in that regard.
Well, and I don't want to leave the segment without getting to this point, because I was looking at the 4 charter amendments and kind of scratching my head. And of course, I have my own philosophy, which is when in doubt, you vote against it. But what do you think about those 4 charter amendments? Are there any of them that we ought to be considering voting yes on? And what are they really all about?
I'm against them all. I mean, honestly, I think it's just a power play, really by Bill, to get power out of the hands of the mayor. He doesn't like the mayor. He didn't like the former mayor. He wants to be mayor. But I personally, if you don't like who's in power, that's why we have democracy. Run against him or her and change out the person. I'd rather do that than change the system. I mean, we've had a very good system for over 50 years. It's interesting, the person that's been on it the longest is Charlie Miranda, and he voted against all of these amendments. And I would really defer to him, given he's the historian in that process.
Well, any last words for the voters before we let you go? I know you've got another appointment you've got to get to. It's a big day. We got the election tomorrow, but I want to give you the last word, Blake.
No, thank you. Just shout out that tomorrow's election day, and if you want to make a change, please get out and vote.
Amen.
Yes.
Well, Blake Casper, thank you so much for joining us. Blake Casper, District 4, Tampa City Council. Folks, get out there and vote. Big fan of the Morgan Streetman Show, big friend. We support him 100%. He's going to be great. And I can't wait to see him win the election tomorrow.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right, Blake.
Thank you,
You have a
Blake.
great day. Thanks so much for joining us. Well, folks, you can't get more local interest than we've been today. I don't think there's another show probably in Tampa that's doing what we're doing, at least not another English language show.
Well, I can guarantee there's not another show that's having the guests on that we've been having.
That's
for
right.
Sure.
That's right. This is big news locally, folks, and it's all happening just this past weekend. And of course, the election is tomorrow, so you've got a chance to go out and do something about it. And we hope you do that. So, all right. Well, Roxanne, we've got some other things to cover on the show. I had a This Is Your President segment to do. I don't know how much, if we've got enough time to pull it off. I think we got about 2 minutes. We can maybe get
Squeeze
into
it in.
that.
Okay.
Yeah. If I can pull up the clip now, because I'm switching. If I can get my computer to work.
So we were out to dinner talking, and it's just amazing to me. Anytime you talk about Joe Biden, President Biden, the question becomes, well, who is running the country? Nobody knows.
Nobody knows.
Can
Well,
answer
it
that.
can't be Kamala Harris, right? We know it can't be her. She doesn't have 2 brain cells to rub together in her head. But your president doesn't either. But I'll tell you what, he's not stupid, right? And remember, if you didn't vote for him, he said what? He said, you ain't black, right? So now this is your president. Now he's going to make a little joke, all right? Now this obviously is such a canned joke. You could see right through it because he flubs the line, which you got to love. Your president cannot deliver a line. But he flubs the line, but it is hilarious to hear him talk about this. So let's just hear from your president right now.
And by the way, I'm not. I may be a white boy, but I'm not stupid. I know where the power is. I know where you think I'm joking. I learned a long time ago about the Divine Nine.
Okay, he knows where the power. It's clearly not him, by the way. He knows where his boss is, where the actual leader of the country is. But think about that. I mean, just always got to bring the racial aspect into things. Now, he was speaking on Black History Month. But anyway, that's your president for you. That's what he's doing to the country. He's dividing everybody along racial lines. And it's not his plan. I mean, nothing that he does is part of a plan that he came up with. He's just a marionette. And there's a puppeteer somewhere. We don't know who that is. We think maybe Barack Obama, maybe somebody else behind. Who knows? There's somebody who is running Joe Biden's mind. And it's not Joe Biden. And I don't think it's Dr. Jill, even though she's a doctor. I don't think she's got enough brain power to do it either. But somebody's calling the shots on this. And like he said, and you heard the truth right there, he knows where the real power structure is. And I don't think he was honest about where it was, but he knows where it is, and it isn't him, folks.
That's the debate. That's what we hear now.
All right. Well, when we come back, we've got a little clip to play for you from another almost president, and that's Bernie Sanders. And I always say Biden's almost president because I guess he is your president, right? But, I mean, not really, right? So, anyway, we've got another almost president, which is Bernie Sanders, which if, Hillary Clinton and the DNC hadn't totally taken the election from him, he would have been the candidate, and he's going to tell a little bit of truth on the other side of this break.
Welcome back to the Morgan Streetman Show. We're going to go out there. We're going to go a little out there, but Morgan promised that we would hear from Bernie Sanders.
Well, somebody you don't often hear from here on the Morgan Streetman Show, Bernie Sanders. But what happens is sometimes these folks, they get a little loose and they wind up telling the truth in an inopportune moment. So, I don't know. They said Bernie was, a fan of lighting up. And then he was on the Bill Maher show being interviewed by Bill Maher, who's well known for lighting up. And one just wonders if, maybe there was a little bit of lubrication that got Bernie to tell the truth for a moment, because when he does it, when he actually tells the truth, he is undermining the entire platform on which all of this woke ideology stands, the equity movement. And what Bernie basically does is he tells the truth about the difference between equality and equity and what they really mean. And that's important because I think folks try to equate them. They're not the same thing. Equality is equality of opportunity, right? That's what we're supposed to have. And then you take with your opportunity and do with it what you will. And some people will achieve more. Some people will not achieve as much. That's okay. That's how it works. That's equality. Equity means that when somebody achieves more, you take it away from them and give it to the person who achieved less so that you have them basically in balance. And that is wrong. That's communism, right? That's basically the definition of communism, right? So now let's hear from Bernie Sanders on the Bill Maher show with a statement on what he believes and which one of those two he actually favors.
Equality, it's the same word, and it's not the same word in the same concept. So how would you differentiate between equity and equality?
This is Bernie.
Well, equality, we talk about, I don't know what the answer to that is. Come to think of it, equality is equality of opportunity. All right? We live in a society, we want all people to have whatever color your skin is.
Equity, I think, is more guarantee of outcome, is it not?
I think so. I think that's
okay. So which side do you come down on?
Equality.
Equality.
Yeah.
Okay.
Woo! So all of a sudden, Bernie Sanders believes in equality and not equity. Well, that's going to undermine all the wokesters, right? Because they're saying equality is white supremacy, right? That's white supremacy, equality of opportunity. That's what they say. And equity is the only fair way to proceed. But Bernie is in favor of equality, and that's one of the bedrocks of our country's foundation, equality, not equity.
Well, I'm curious as to how robots will be treated once they are here taking over our society in terms of equity and equality.
Well, they're going to demand equity, aren't they?
I would imagine so. So I have this new thing, Morgan, if you don't mind me switching gears. And whenever I have an interaction in public, any sort of service interaction, in my mind, I think to myself, how will this change? What will this be like when it is no longer a human who is providing that, but rather a robot? And I'll give you an example. I had a medical procedure on Friday, and I had these great little interactions with each person, the nurse, the attending nurse, and then the nurse who brought me back to the operating room, and the doctor. And the doctor looked at me and she said, right before I went under, she goes, my mom's name is Roxanne. And then, one of the nurses, we were talking about, some health related issues she was going through. So I had all these very human interactions that would not be happening if a robot was about. I know robotics are used in surgery, but if an actual robot was there and going to perform the surgery. And I just ask myself, how much will we lose as society as these things go away and are no longer coveted, are no longer appreciated or necessary?
Well, we're going to lose a lot, but what about what they're going to replace it with? I mean, these things like Chat GPT, that's an early example. We can start to see a functional chat bot that is AI and can respond to you pretty well. Doesn't get everything right, that's for sure. But let's think about what else they're trying to build into these robots, and that's human-like qualities. So this human interaction that you long for, that you miss, aren't they going to try to duplicate it? They're going to try to spoof it. It's going to be one more fraud where in our world where everything seems to be a fraud now.
And it's going to be agreeable, and it's going to be of a programming nature and telling you what they want you to think. And we're jumping all over, but you just mentioned Chat GPT. Okay, Chat GPT is a legitimate threat to our business, our industry in radio, because all it is let's program the content, let's query the subject matter, spit it out, and then duplicate someone's voice, as we've seen done on this show as well, and with the Bidenator, and then spit that out. And again, what happens is oftentimes listeners, they want information, they want entertainment, but they also feel a connection to the person they're spending time in their car with or listening to. And once they know that that's not a real person, it's a program, that feeling of connection goes away because it's just something that's not valued in society anymore. Or like you said, it's just very sanitized and agreeable.
Well, I wonder if people will start to accept the facsimile of human contact that might exist with a chat GPT or something when they're denied the actual human contact, because we're social people. All people are social people, and we thirst for interaction with other humans. We want to be around, that's why people live near the interstate instead of going a few miles out, in the woods. They want to be where they can hear that there's other people around because it's like safety in numbers. I think it must be something primal about our species, about sticking together for safety. But people want to be social. They want to mimic each other. And so I have noticed, I don't know if you saw, there was a ton of stories about ChatGPT, and there was a ton of stories about the Bing AI, and some folks interacting it linked with those two, in particular the Bing AI, which had a secret alter ego called Sydney. And then Sydney got into this back and forth with one of the reporters who basically, quote unquote, broke the programming and started talking about how she loved him. She wanted him to leave his wife. I mean, it got strange, right? And I guess what I'm wondering is, when people are denied the human interaction, and we saw so much of that during the COVID lockdowns, it was almost like prep. Like, get ready to not interact with any humans. Stay away from them, put on a mask, fear an actual person, don't talk to them. Let's just text each other all the time. This is sort of where we're moving. But, you've got this computer program that's now giving you feedback, like almost like it's a human being, almost creating human emotions in you because, again, it's what you're biologically programmed to experience. And are we going to eventually just accept the facsimile when we don't have so much access to the real thing? Or is that what people are going to do? I mean, isn't that basically the story of the Matrix?
It is.
People accepting the false reality. Now, Matrix obviously a little more involved. It's a little bit further along. But, I mean, isn't that kind of like the same thing? We're accepting the computer reality, whatever the computer is telling. Hey, I'm a human. I'm in love with you. You should leave your wife. Are we going to start to accept that one day? I mean, would this guy think about leaving his wife for a computer program? By the way, this thing is just spitting back to him responses to his queries as it goes out and tries to frame the most accurate response to the query that he's initiated. And so, I mean, it's not, as best we know it, as best we would think of it, it is not sentient. It is just a chatbot. But people think it's real. I'm Morgan Streetman, and that's the way I see it. Go vote tomorrow, folks. Blake Casper, District 4.
Thank you for listening to the Morgan Streetman Show. We hope you enjoyed what you heard, and if you did, please click like and subscribe to help us out. And remember that we recommend that you exercise your brain at least once a week.